Okay, we're live. Welcome to another edition of the Supernatural Science Challenge Show. And this week we're going to do an informal discussion with Nephilimfree about various worldviews, including creationism and atheism. So I think we should start off by asking Nephilimfree what his view is and how he rationalises that. So that would be good. Thanks. Neph, do you want to start off?
Oh, okay. Sure, I was muted. I had to unmute. Thank you. Well, my position is that life has been evidenced as being a product of intelligent design and special creation. We were chatting just before you started broadcast, and someone was asking, I was trying to explain that genetic change does not equal evolution. There has to be a mechanism for evolution, and science hasn't revealed one. So and someone made the example, well, organism can get taller if taller is beneficial, but my response to that is, well, if you continuously make an organism taller, that's never going to change its anatomy, is it? And neither is making it shorter. And adding fins to a fish is never going to give it the features of a land-dwelling creature. So the evolutionist has to believe that an unfathomable measure of time going into the past is capable somehow of doing what scientific evidence has not provided a mechanism for in real time. So we don't observe any kind of mutations building new information that defines new anatomical features in any living thing. So firstly, we're left without a mechanism, and secondly, if all you can point to are changes to color, size, shape, and pattern, then you still don't have a mechanism for evolution, because you have to believe that the changes that actually change anatomy, the new features arising, somehow happen, but all we can point to is color, size, shape, and pattern, which themselves can't change anatomy. See, so they're still stuck with believing that somewhere in the distant past is this mechanism that's happening, but they can't even point to it. So I would say, why believe that happens? Isn't that actually non-scientific? If you don't have the mechanism, why is it scientific to believe it happens?
May I explain a good example, well, to explain sort of furthermore my point from before, and also to talk to that a little bit. Assume that the population of humans is getting, it's beneficially to get taller, right? But you still have short people around because there's no external pressures for why you would say that particularly short people would no longer exist, for example, right? And this is where you get drives, evolutionary drives, which don't exist anymore as harshly to human populations because of our, better ways of life and stuff like that. We're not affected by environmental changes and things like that. If there was suddenly some massive environmental change where we were forced to, only taller people survived, all the shorter people would die, and then what would happen is let's say 100 years later we find fossils, and it's like, oh, here's pre-humans to what we are now as 100-year later humans. Look at this. Oh wow, they're shorter. This is bizarre, because the current population at that time, there'd be no one below, let's say that it was quite a high drive. Let's say you had to be quite tall, like 7 foot. Wow, we haven't seen anyone under 6 foot for 50 years. This is bizarre. It's like a pre-human, I suppose. I mean, I don't sort of see how. I mean, you see that happening over a short period of time. You imagine an enormous amount of time. It's like a pre-bug thing died. Well, not bug thing, but pre sort of ape human thing died. Thousands and thousands of years ago. It's what we are, but it's just, it died so fucking long ago. Sorry, I'm not sure if we can swear. But anyway, I don't know if that helps to sort of explain my point a bit more.
Well, I do understand, but all you're expressing is faith in deep time without a mechanism. So, for example, your example with creatures get taller and the shorter population dies off. Well, that's all well and good. That's natural selection, and can even do that. And natural selection is a real thing. Natural selection is merely the observation that creatures which are suited for their environments thrive, and ones that are not don't. But changing height, again, I point you to the fact that changing height itself is never going to cause one type of creature to evolve into another. You have to have something more than height, because evolution theory posits that anatomy changes, and that's how fish became over long periods of this imaginary time, became land-dwelling creatures with lungs and not gills. Legs and bones with tendons, and with cartilage with digits and not fins. See, that's what evolution theory claims. It claims anatomical change takes place at a very rapid pace. Actually, in the history of this world, according to evolutionists, if it's billions of years, it has to be actually vastly rapid. We don't even see it happening. But so changing, see, the example you give doesn't evidence anatomical change, just bigger or smaller, change in color, change in pattern, even change in shape. Look at the difference in a Chihuahua skull and that of a Great Dane. They're still 100% dog. See, there's no anatomical feature found in one dog, not in all dogs. See, but evolution says otherwise. So all you can ever point to is changes to color, size, shape, and pattern, and that's insufficient to explain the various anatomical features that exist in tremendous variety in living things. You still have to have a mechanism, and there is none.
I think we're going to just jump to someone else. I think that was the idea.
Okay. Hi, Neff. We've never spoken, and I'm a layman when it comes to biology, etc. But I did have a question, and I'm curious as to your answer, because I really have never had a definitive answer to this. I understand that you have your points of view, etc. But I'm curious. You're not a scientist, so and people don't have to be scientists to understand science, but you're very sure about certain. The question is, why wouldn't you, for example, try to write a peer-reviewed paper with some very, some evidence and studies? I really am curious as to why you wouldn't do that.
I hear atheists ask this question of creationists all the time, and I could just turn it around on them. Why don't you write a peer-reviewed journal paper and submit it that proves evolution? What is the actual point of that?
There are many peer-reviewed papers that prove evolution, but there are none that are peer-reviewed that don't. So why wouldn't you want to overturn all these findings and revolutionize science as we know it?
Well, it has all been overturned, and all the evidence that overturns it is written by the evolutionist scientists themselves. For example, when they write a paper about a genetic mutation in a study, and they explain the observed effects of the mutations, they never point to anything that's evolutionary change. So all they're doing is endlessly providing evidence that their observation of the observed effects of mutation do not cause the anatomical change evolution claims has.
So you're saying that the scientists themselves are disproving evolution in peer-reviewed papers?
Absolutely.
Well, my question would be, why wouldn't other scientists be aware of this?
Well, many are. It's just the evolutionist scientists refuse to see it. I mean, let me put it like this. When they write a paper about the effects of genetic mutation, what do they typically observe as the effects? Weaknesses, deformity, and death. That's the typical, on a rare occasion, something that's actually intelligent design evidence, that the organism is capable on the fly of creating a novel enzyme in order to break down nylon, something. That's an ingenious process. That's intelligent design. But do they ever write, this creature is gaining a new cartilage in an area where it didn't exist before. We continue to mutate its offspring, its offspring's offspring, its offspring's offspring's offspring, and the cartilage keeps on growing. No example like that in any science journal.
Right. So your point is either it's being suppressed or they just have cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance. They're unable to see the evidence for what it is because they fervently and faithfully believe that somehow it happens despite the fact that the evidence.
Oh, damn.
I
hope he comes back. Yeah, he was breaking up a little bit, and maybe his connection died or his browser crashed or something. Well, hopefully he'll come back. Okay. Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay, I'm pretty much done. If somebody else wants to ask, I mean, I could go on, but I know other people do want to ask a question. So.
Nicola, did you have a relevant point to this discussion? I know you've been. If not, Katzma, did you have a relevant point?
Yeah, I don't think I think Nephilim. You're not getting how it really works. It's slow, incremental changes over time that occur, and you're not just suddenly gonna get one species that pops out of another. It doesn't work that way. I think it's um, a species becomes a different species, no longer breed with the same species, but the change is slow and incremental, very slow.
Well, I mean, you're welcome to believe that, but see, we don't even know of a mechanism for it. Instead, what we know is this. Organisms are defined by prescriptive genetic information that defines various creatures. A llama is defined by the genome of a llama. A catfish is defined by the information in the genome of a catfish, and so on and so on. We don't see any new genetic information arising in the genomes of creatures that define new anatomical features. That's a necessity if evolution theory were true. So
there was a time where only the things that were existing could possibly exist in the environments that were there, if that makes sense. Like those particular cells developed into those particular species, if that makes sense.
Well, I know that you believe that.
That would only make sense if genetic structures copied each other exactly, in which they don't copy each other, and those are the instructions as to how to build an organism. So to say that there's no mechanism, that's not true, because genetic structures change over time, because it's like an old magnetic tape. It's a copy of a copy of a copy. Of course, there's going to be changes and mutations within how many times it's copied.
Well, you're welcome to believe that, but all you're doing is expressing your faith that it takes place. You can't cite me a single scientific example.
Well, it sounds like you're expressing your faith in the fact that it's intelligent design. You just state that it's intelligent design before. I don't see why you say that's an intelligent design.
Well, I can.
Whereas it's something that's beneficial for survival, which is optimal, obviously, for a species to maintain its survival. So, I mean, anything that's geared in that direction makes sense. In terms of,
well, I can give you a reason. I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. I'm a little too quick to respond. Please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were finished.
Well, I wanted to say you can go on Google and find out thousands of information about how genetic structures work. I mean, it's all over the place. Yeah, the proof is out there. All you gotta do is look for it.
Well, I have. I've looked intensively. See, but you're still expressing faith in a mechanism which is unknown. And you asked me. Now, I was asked, what is it? Why should I believe intelligent design? What's the reason for believing that? Well, let me read to you a paragraph that I wrote. It describes one of my perfectly good reasons for believing in intelligent designs.
Which is a faith.
Evolution theory was plausible for people seeking naturalism. A naturalistic explanation for life 100 years ago. Things have changed. We now have modern biological science. Now here's the reason. Okay, this is a rather long paragraph. I'll try to read quickly. Life is based on information which is digitally encoded and stored in a more compressed form than man's best computer information compression schemes. It possesses thousands of three-dimensional information hierarchies directed to the cell. When the DNA molecule is super cold as chromatin, much of its information is unavailable to the cell that is that is, much of its information is available to the cell, which is not available when the molecule is uncoiled, and vice versa. Genetic information, when read by the cell's machinery in one direction, produces different information than when it's read by the cell's machinery in the opposite direction. The features, this feature alone is far superior to man's best computer coding software technology, because it's impossible for us to write a software application in two directions and providing separate programs. Okay, its information sequences are overlapping and nested, sharing base pairs between sequences across the entire molecule. Its information sequences across a 7-foot molecule are organized to conform to linguistics laws that go beyond Zipf's law. It contains codes built upon codes which regulate the use of each other. Its information processing possesses in chemical form the human language properties of phonetics, semantics, punctuation, syntax, and grammar. Its information input and output processing includes the analytical operations of proofreading, information comparison, cut, insert, copy and paste, backup, and restore, all of which are operated by algorithms which require if and when statements, just like a computer program. Information, algorithms, linguistics are all immaterial, and nature has no potential to produce them. They are products of a mind. During an organism's development, the genetic information instructs the cell on how to turn on and off, like chemical light switches, many sequences of information in a supremely complex and not yet understood orchestral arrangement of various groupings in orders, and so as to build the structures of an organism. These patterns of genes being switched on and off are so complex, man will likely never decipher them. Science has proven that evolution was well, anyway, I won't read the rest of it. But you see the point. Genetic information is the most complex thing known to exist in this world. It operates algorithmically. Information copy paste, input, rewrite, proofreading, three-dimensional hierarchies of information, all manner of this stuff. When read one direction, it provides one set of information. When read the opposite direction, it provides another set of information. Both are critical to the organism. This is technology that's superior to man's. And yet people are going to know this in the 21st century and still believe evolution is possible. I would say that's like finding a computer in a desert and proclaiming to yourself that the wind and rain could have built it over 1 million years.
Okay, so Dylan wanted you. I'll just say this quick because it's in the text tab. Dylan wanted you to provide a source for that. So if you keep that in mind, and I think Nadia now wants to respond to your point. Are you okay with that, Nadia?
I can go in the microbiological direction or the philosophical direction. You want the biochem first or now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and
so,
if you could keep in mind the point that Dylan made for your next response as well. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah. The trouble with some of these analogies with computers is that the computational models actually don't align with the chemical processes. And it's also very much an oversimplification. To the extent you're going to, say, claim some kind of advancement, you might be better served by offering a more distributed notion of where the information resides, and also a more complete account of the mechanisms, such as involving the ribosomes and other free amino acids and enzymes. So go ahead.
Is it my turn to respond? Okay. Sure, I'll give examples. Yes, it does, Nadia. Research this paper. This is from the Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology, Rutgers University. The Linguistics of DNA, words, sentences, grammar, phonetics, and semantics. If you read that paper, they explain how the chemical processes of the DNA molecule are exactly likened to human language properties like phonetics, semantics, syntax, punctuation, and grammar. So the name of the paper is, I'll read it again for you, The Linguistics of DNA, words, sentences, grammar, phonetics, and semantics, Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology, Rutgers University. I have a list, a selection of here. You might research quantitative linguistic study of DNA sequences. This discusses algorithmic processes in the DNA that go beyond Zipf's law of linguistics. Linguistics features of non-coding DNA syndrome sequences. You might look up palindromes in the genetic information. As for epigenetics, you can look up. Well, there are things on that. Here's another. So all the things that I said in that paragraph that I read are actual features of the genetic information testified to by secular papers in the science journals. I'm not just blowing hot air. This is how secular geneticists describe DNA themselves.
Nadia, did you want to respond to that? Otherwise, we'll go with Nick. Did you want to respond to that?
I can't relay without the reference, so go ahead.
Okay, so we'll go with Dr. Quantum. Did you want to? You wanted to go into the biochem anyway.
Yeah, sure, I can go. Hello, Nev.
Hi.
Excuse me if you can't understand my English. I'm from Denmark, so maybe it's hard for you to understand me. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and you can just we will go back and forth here if it's okay with you. First, I need you to define what do you mean by information when you talk about the genes and such.
I mean prescriptive information. For example, the information in a gene that codes for a protein prescribes how that protein is to be assembled. It gives specific information specified. It tells you, it tells the cell that these exact amino acids, not this one, not one like it, but this one, and that one, and that one, and that one will be placed in this exact order, so that when they superfold into a machine, they become a specific molecular machine. It's complex, specified information. It's not random. It's not willy-nilly in any way. It's specified. It's prescriptive, not descriptive.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify your position. You went on a long tangent before about digital codings and you also said that we haven't seen any morphological or physiological changes in bacteria. That's right. You said that right?
Anatomical change.
Yeah, anatomical. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right.
But actually, I don't know. Are you familiar with the Robert Linsky experiment?
Yes, he bred bacteria to 5,000 generations and discovered that the 500th was more suitable for the environment than the 5,000.
Yes, but it was divided into 12 sections. And one of the sections who is particularly interesting was the E. coli. And one of the biggest factors between how we differentiate E. coli from Salmonella is that E. coli is not able to grow under citrate conditions. But after about 30,000 or 50,000 generations, it were able to do that. And all the experiments also showed that all the bacteria had become more rounder in their shapes, and the volume had also increased in the populations. So yes, we have observed this.
Okay, so round is not an anatomical feature when it comes
to
a
single cell. For a bacteria, it is.
No, to a single cell.
You know how many shapes a bacteria can take?
Okay, but round doesn't change the anatomy of the organism. It changes only its shape. Color, size, shape, and pattern are not anatomical. What you need is a new organelle or a new feature, a new vacuoles, something arise that did not exist in the anatomy of the bacteria.
But it can now grow under citric acid conditions. Now it uses it in a chemical cycle. That is a huge change to a bacteria.
Can you tell me how that evidences the bacteria is becoming something other than a bacteria?
It has changed species. It's no longer the same E. coli anymore. Because the main thing that differentiates E. coli from Salmonella is that it is not able to grow on a citrate. But as soon as that changes, what we have now is something new. We don't know how to define it. It's something completely new. When you are at this level of skill, the smallest changes can make such huge differences in a bacteria.
So all this does is relate to survivability of the bacteria. It doesn't add anything to the anatomy of the bacteria.
Yes, it also changes the shape of it.
What again is it about it that demonstrates it's becoming something other than a bacteria?
Well, it can't become anything other than a bacteria. Bacteria is a domain of life. It's not a species. It's a domain.
Okay. So it's not evolving to become something else. There's no new anatomical feature that has arisen in the bacteria in its cell. Right?
Yes, I told you it became larger and more rounder instead of an elliptical shape of some sort. It became more rounder and larger. That is physiological change.
And so it became a bacteria. It started as one and it ended as one with no anatomical difference except shape. So let's extrapolate this to your evolution theory further down the road. If you change the shape,
can I just quickly ask again?
If you change the shape of a fish any number of times, does it ever become a land-dwelling amphibian tetrapod?
But it's different when it's a bacteria. It is different.
But you haven't cited any anatomical difference.
Hang on, sorry to listen. I just wanted to ask, Nep, have you blocked Fiona because she wants to join the conversation? Nephilim, are you there?
Yeah, I was muted.
Oh, sorry.
I'll see if she's blocked. But I would ask you this: Fiona likes to make points by making tiny little statements, 1,000 of them, and it takes her about 19 minutes to make a statement. You got to force her to make a claim in a minute or two at the most, because if you don't, she'll take 18 minutes to say something she could say in 30 seconds. I could do in 30 seconds.
I'll apply the 2-minute rule for everyone.
Yeah, and because the conversation will go nowhere with her here if she does this continuously.
I'll make sure that no one does that. If you want to unblock it, then she can come in as well.
Can I just say something to Nep though about his response about saying that Fiona takes a lot of time to explain this stuff? The thing is, molecular biology isn't a very easy subject to cover in a very short amount of time. These explanations take a long time to explain. You can't just simply demand that you have it all for you in a nutshell and without making it too vague.
Well, let me explain why I say that. Because when evolutionists are unable to provide any example of their claims, what they do is, and I just wrote something on my blog about this, what they'll do is they'll go into an endless series of micro-theories, one to supposedly support the other, all of which, when taken together, still didn't provide any evidence for evolution. And it just really becomes boring listening to an hour-long discussion of, how we observed that this creature, this cytosine, and now this molecule affects that molecule. Yes. Get to the point. See, I don't have all day to listen to somebody tell me how cytosine are seen.
Okay, so hang on. What I can do is this: if at 9 o'clock in half an hour's time, we could have a short break, and then if you wanted to, you could unblock Fiona, and then I'll make sure that everyone sticks to the time limit, so that I've been doing a reasonable job up to now, so that doesn't happen. Would you be prepared to agree with that?
Perhaps. I asked Fiona if she'd debate me one-on-one. She's unwilling to, so I don't know why I should be willing to discuss and hear anything.
So either way, we'll have a short break in half an hour anyway, just to let that happen if you wanted to. Anyway, were you talking Nef or Dr. Quantum? I can't remember who was talking. Someone will finish off their point.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. First off, Nef, a bacteria still being a bacteria has nothing to do with speciation. Nothing. A bacteria, it is a domain of life. It is. I'm not sure. Do you know how the tree is built up? The evolutionary tree of life. Species are very down below in the bottom, and at the top we have how we go from prokaryote to eukaryote and akaryote. You're probably familiar with that. So, of course, it is still a bacteria. Yes, it couldn't be anything else, of course. But it's no longer an E. coli bacteria. It is something completely different. And the anatomical, morphological, and physiological change is that it is now able to use citric acid in its living conditions.
That's not anatomical.
That is an anatomical difference.
No, it's not. That's biochemical. That's not
yes,
anatomical. No. You need to go look up the word anatomy in the dictionary. You're so far out in space here. I don't know how do you explain to somebody that a biochemical change in an organism is not an anatomical feature? See, I don't know how to even help you.
Nef, it is a difference in it.
A difference, yes. It is not an anatomical difference.
Yes, it is.
No.
Nef, listen here. Do you know how a cell is composed, how it uses all chemicals? Do you know that? Do you even know what an action potential is in a cell? Do you even know what a sodium-potassium pump is? Do you know that?
That's not going to provide help for you.
Just answer the question. Do you know what those things are?
Do you know what a hyperfocal distance is? Is that going to help you? Is that going to help me?
No, but you are answering my question with another question. Answer my question.
Your question is moot. It's an attempt to move the goalpost.
No. What I'm trying to tell you is that when we're talking about bacteria, even how they use chemicals in order to survive, that is anatomy in a bacteria.
It's not.
Bacteria is composited of organic materials. So even when you change how it uses other organic compounds, that is an anatomical difference in it.
No, it is not.
Yes, it is.
No.
Yes, it is.
I don't know how to help you.
Okay, so we appear to have reached an impasse here. I think Nadia has a point though she wants to make.
Yes, well, the paper you gave might be from a secular source. I would actually argue that they are inappropriately trying to superimpose pre-existing abstract models of computation on the cell. There may be one that can represent the cells in terms of computation, but their notion of a Turing machine is vastly oversimplified for the various interactions in the cell. For instance, the tape is not the medium of output in a cell, where in a Turing machine, essentially it transforms the constants of the tape in the course of its computation. There are some more elaborate models than Turing machines that have a separate output stream, and they are in like fashion tapes, where in the cell you don't have that kind of working space, and also the influence of various enzymes, DNA methylation, histones and chromatin and so on are not accounted for, amongst numerous other enzymes and such that are involved. So those would all fit into a model of computation that was sufficiently elaborate to represent it, but the one they're actually trying to superimpose isn't elaborate enough. Go ahead.
I say it's highly specific. Let me help you understand something. I don't want to deal with this any more than I have to because it's so ridiculous. Let me explain something about this claim. Webster's Medical Dictionary defines anatomy as a branch of morphology that deals with the structure of organisms. Right? Okay, so structural design, the structural makeup, especially of an organism and of any of its parts. Now, you're confusing anatomy with biochemistry. Even in a bacteria, the definition of Webster in Webster's Medical Dictionary of Biochemistry is chemistry that deals with the chemical compounds and processes occurring in organisms. So your citrate example is a biochemical example, not an anatomical one. Be careful to confuse things in science. You don't. If I'll say this, in order to argue for your theory of evolution, you have to swap two different fields of science to make a false claim. There's a problem. So, in conclusion, we don't see any anatomical change in any organism. Evolutionists believe that it happens in unimaginable periods of time in the past, even though we don't have no mechanism for it. I'd say the very existence of the DNA molecule, complex information read forward and backward, producing different information, etc., overlapping nested sequences, codes upon codes that regulate other codes. To believe that evolution is true in light of modern science is just ridiculous. Life was so clearly designed.
Did you want to respond, Nadia? Otherwise, I note that Prudent has been trying to talk for quite a while, or did you want to respond to that? Nadia, are you there? Okay, Prudent, did
I'm
you
here.
Okay,
Oh,
did
sorry.
you respond to that?
I'm not sure how to, given that it doesn't really apply to, I guess, our dispute about models of computation being embodied in the cells.
Well, Nadia, you should go look at that paper that I provided you by Rutgers University, where they describe the chemical processes in the genomes of living things as algorithmic. And you might also look at Vein Basic, a geneticist, and his work describes the algorithmic processes. He said they are likened exactly to algorithms. They are algorithms, they're just chemical ones. Just as a computer operates an algorithm by turning switches on and off, organisms operate algorithms with chemical switches. It's the same process. It's just one is chemistry, the other is microscopic electronic switches.
Yeah, I was arguing for my knowledge of computer science that the model of computation they employed was inadequate to represent what they're trying to model.
Well, I'm afraid that you're at odds with those scientists then. Do you think that they're wrong and you're right?
I read the paper and came to that conclusion when I read it.
Well, why do they state emphatically that these are processes of the cell? That it is in fact likened to linguistics? Is this the same argument that we hear from evolutionists? It looks like a car. That doesn't mean it's a car. We just use the word car to describe it. Is that the kind of argument you're trying to make? Because that's what evolutionists do, you know.
No, I argued that in terms of model computation, you can invent quite some number of them. For instance, there are Bode-Neumann machines and linking machines and push-down automaton and so on. And these, the model that they're attempting to employ in claiming that the cell is somehow like computer or DNA is like a Turing machine's tape is not rich enough to represent the actuality of what's happening. Granted, I know less about the biochemical aspects than the computational, but go ahead.
Well, if that's not so, why do the scientists that are evolutionists themselves describe these properties in just that fashion? Because the journals are chock full of science papers about genetics that describe things in this way. Codes, they describe genetic code. Well, they use the word code because, well, it's code. They use the words linguistics, like Zipf's law of linguistics, because, well, it's linguistics.
Nephilim, sorry to interject here, but it's horribly mistaken. I mean, I've studied programming for about a couple years, and in retrospect, DNA and genetics itself isn't comparable to programming at all. I mean,
I would say that's completely false. I'd say that's an example of how evolutionists are in denial of what has been discovered since the days of Darwin, because it doesn't fit their paradigm. Evolution can't be true if the DNA molecule is an unfathomably complex software application, which is what it seems to be. And so in order to cling to evolution theory, they simply deny the discoveries of modern science.
No, they don't. It's just that you're denying that they're there.
It seems that if we don't accept your definition, you just have to be in denial about it. You just simply have to resort to, well, no, you're wrong, and you're just in denial.
No, I can support this. Let me give you an example. I've got lots of these. Okay, Michael Polanyi, former chairman of physical chemistry at the University of Manchester. He stated this. he says, as the arrangement of a printed page is extraneous to the chemistry of the printed page, so is the base sequences in the DNA extraneous to the chemical forces that work in the DNA molecule. It is this physical indeterminacy of the sequences that produces the improbability of any particular sequence, and thereby enables it to have meaning, a meaning that has a mathematically determined information content. So what he's saying is the arrangement of the base pairs in the DNA is not a necessity. They can be arranged any which way. You can build codons any which way you want to. So it's not a chemical necessity for DNA to possess the information, the algorithms, the linguistics that it does, or the information. The code system itself is not a necessity of chemistry, and yet there it is. So I would say that you're at odds with Michael Polanyi and with about hundreds and hundreds of other scientists. It's just a denial of the modern discoveries of science because they don't fit the evolution paradigm.
But how in the world does that prove that God, that in fact that God, the one who's doing this?
Excuse me. Well, because a mind is necessary for information, linguistics, or algorithms. These are all products of mind. It's the only potential source for them.
How do you know that?
Because they're all well, by inference. All examples of these that are let me finish. All examples of these that are known are from mind.
How do you know that mind is right or correct?
And for example, an algorithm requires an if and when statements. Comparison of information, for example.
Actually, no, it's if and then.
Well, that's true, right? If and then. Okay, so an algorithm might say if A, I'll just dumb it down real simple and make a case. If A is bigger than B, then go do C, right? That's algorithmic, right? But
yes.
Chemistry doesn't have any if in itself. Matter simply is. It interacts with the law, with itself, with other matter in accordance to the laws of physics, if it can. There is no if I'm able to. There's no if I am, then go do. There's nothing like that in chemistry. Molecules simply are. There is no mind involved, so there's no forethinking in chemistry. There's no forethinking. There's no if I can do this here, then read X base pairs of DNA, go down here and find this one, and start from there and read exactly this number of base pairs and stop. See, that chemistry doesn't have any forward thinking, but this is what we see in DNA. It's all throughout the genetic molecule. That requires a mind.
No, the DNA itself has a set of instructions that already tells it what to do, and yet we don't.
Instructions require a mind.
Not necessarily. I've written AI that can they're able to do a set amount of tasks in a video game or on my desktop, so that it's able to open up Internet Explorer or open up Google Chrome whenever I need it to, or whenever I'm away, or whenever a task is needed for me.
Do you see?
And that doesn't need my mind. It does. It just does it automatically.
Do you see the great flaw in your thinking on this? Where did it
so?
originate? What
Me.
created it? Right.
Me. Right. Yeah, but I created the set code that allows it to think for itself, so it can do its own set of tasks.
That's what DNA does. It had a designer just like your self-replication did.
And how did that prove God? How does God, the designer, when he had no imprint of his design? See, whenever I make code, I leave a little imprint that it is my design. It is of what I created. But God hasn't left anything like that.
He's left us his inspired word in which he states, "There is none before me, none after me. I am."
No, I mean like a little imprint. You know what I mean by imprint? Like there's a little signature and everything, like in a watch.
Okay.
Like so, in every watch designed, there's a little thing that every designer puts, so everyone knows it's theirs.
So if you take the imprint, if you take the labels off the automobile, if somebody showed you a model of an automobile built in Slovakia in 1970, you don't know who this car maker is. You never heard of this brand before. They went out of business in '72. Okay, and there's no labels, no emblem on the car that says, this is a Yolansky or something, right? Are you going to tell me that you would believe that car is potential because there's no mark on it that says who the designer was? It could possibly have been something that the wind and the dirt and the rain.
You're able to look up the designer. You're able to look up where the car originated from, and then look further into this. So then you can find out who's the manufacturer of this car.
Mhm.
That's easy thinking.
Well, it's obviously a product of an intelligence. You admitted you're the intelligent agent that made it, and so is an automobile, and so is a cell. A cell is also has the imprints of intelligence. It has genetic information of astonishing ingenious design, features, properties which only come from mind, information, algorithms, linguistics, and code. Chemistry in nature has no forward thinking. Chemistry matter does not think forward into the future about what to do if or when. It just is. But every living thing on this planet operates by information which is digitally encoded, overlapping and nested, read forward and backward to produce separate but critical information, and possessing human language properties of phonetic, semantics, syntax, punctuation, and grammar, complex specified information. It's specific. It's not random garble. It's specific. It's specified. It conforms to linguistics laws, and it's overlapping and nested. You're welcome to believe that nature can do that, but now you need scientific evidence that chemistry can do these things.
And there is. I mean, it's just that the fact you just don't want to look for it or believe it because you're so enclosed in that little box of yours that you just don't want to see it.
So what is that evidence that nature can produce those things?
And I will tell you what I've told everyone who keeps asking me that: look it up for yourself and not ask me. Look it up for yourself and prove to yourself that it's there. Don't ask me.
I've investigated the subject extensively, and no scientist has ever put.
Neff, I know what you do. You just read the top. You just read the title of any paper, and then make an inference on what you read. This is.
No scientist has ever put forth any evidence in any paper in any journal that nature is capable of producing information, linguistics, or algorithms.
Have you actually looked into that at all, instead of taking your own word for it?
Yeah, I've done searches, read the abstracts of many papers in science, and nobody ever likens anything that they find to no chemist. I'll give you a testimony of one scientist. His name is excuse me. Let's see if I can remember his name. Frank Turin. I'm getting his name wrong. Maybe I'll remember it. He's one of the 10 most cited scientists in the world. He's a chemist, and he became a creationist because of the evidence in creation. He is one of the 10 most cited scientists in the world. That means of all the scientists whose papers or whose work are cited by other scientists in their papers, he's one of the 10 most cited scientists on the planet. Okay, he says, I don't understand this evolution theory. I understand chemistry. I build molecules for a living. I know how difficult it is to build a molecule. He says, there is no reason, nor scientists have ever provided any reason to believe that chemistry is capable of producing the properties of the DNA molecule. Now, he's one of the 10 most cited scientists in the world. And I'm just going to have to go with what he says. You can go with what you believe exists in the journals. I'm going to go with what's really there, and that is the description of it, but no offer of an explanation as to how it could have come into being.
Okay, so Kim, I think this is a good opportunity. I'll let you finish off your point if you were going to make one, Matt. But is it possible we could have the break now? If you want to, because Fiona really wants to join. So if it's possible, you could unblock Fiona, and then we could get her on, and I'll make sure that we stick to the 2-minute time. If you're okay with that, Neff. I think you might have to leave the hangout while you do that. Are you okay with that?
I tried to find her in Google. I'm trying to do it right now. When I searched for Fiona a few minutes ago, her channel did not pop up. I'm still trying to do it. I would refer you to this quotation that I just provided here. No physical hypothetical mechanism has ever been suggested for the generation of nucleic acid algorithms. That's from Travers and Abel, Chance, and Cell Biology International, Volume 28, 2004. So, of course, these guys read the papers, the journals themselves. There's no chemist, no biologist has ever offered an explanation as to how algorithms could exist in the DNA molecule by natural process. So when I say a thing, I can back it up. There you have it. That's in a science journal, by the way. But I'm still looking for Fiona. Let's see if I get her.
Check out your Google Hangouts. That might be the problem. You might have blocked her in Hangouts by accident.
Nadia just posted her profile for you, so you can check her profile directly.
Okay.
Yeah. Go straight to the profile. It'll have a gray thing that says blocked underneath her name. And you can click on that. It'll bring up pop-up. Gives you an unblock button. You'll have to refresh after you do it.
Yeah, the page is locked up. A script has got it locked up. It'll probably clear up if I wait a few seconds. Just have to wait for the script to stop.
That's usually something to do with the active external text chats and stuff.
Okay, I'm at her.
You'll be able to see it. Go ahead.
I'm at her page, and it doesn't. It shows mute Fiona and block Fiona. So now this is from my my personal Google page. Let me go to my YouTube page and then access Google Plus from there in my other profile, my Nephilimfree profile. Maybe I'm blocked there, so I'll try.
Yeah, the different profiles have different block lists, so you'll have to be sure you're using the same profile you're using in this Hangout.
Right. So let me try it that way.
No, this is actually pretty. This is a pretty nice setup. I kind of like this. This is my first time actually being here. It's pretty nice.
Welcome to the party, pal.
I hope I come to future discussions. This seems fun.
Yeah, I've been for a while actually.
Oh, really? For how long?
Well, since it started, Quantum and and I were on for the first time ever on the Magic Sandwich Show together. Just happenstance. It was our first time ever on a discussion thing, and ever since then, Quantum's been doing the show, and I've been invited. So I don't show up sometimes for a few months at a time. I get busy, but I do try to show up.
It won't allow me to do it. It keeps taking me to forcing me to my other profile.
Try closing your browser. Are you using Hangouts on its app or the browser itself?
In the browser.
You might have to close your browser and then try then load it up again, see if that works, or just sign out of your profile.
I have to leave. I have to leave the Hangout to do that.
Are you
I'll make sure that the Hangout isn't filled up, so you can join back immediately.
Okay. I'll be honest with you, I'm not really too keen on the idea of talking to her because she lied about me, and she did so publicly. She said that I lied about her having a PhD, that I said that she did not have one. I made no such comment. The post that I made on that video that was made by G-Man was that I questioned whether or not she was truly a Christian or whether she was a wolf in sheep's clothing. I never mentioned her PhD. But she's turned around and publicly said that I lied about that and that I questioned whether or not she had a PhD. And she argued with me of that publicly in a Hangout. And I don't appreciate people lying about what the things I say. I never mentioned her PhD.
We'll make sure that we'll keep it civilized if we do that. I mean, if the Google thing forces you to leave your Hangout, then I'll make sure that no one else joins so that you can come straight to that.
Okay.
And if Fiona's still here, maybe she can bring that evidence forward or not, if that's true. That if Neff actually said that, if she is still there.
I don't know if she is, but Fiona, if you are, please try to join. And I know you were watching for a bit, so hopefully you still are.
Right. This has happened to me before. It's an absolute pain in the arse. With the Google Plus.
This is why I've never blocked anyone ever.
yeah, it's a really bad idea. Never block anyone because this is what happens.
Yeah, I've never. I'm not saying I won't. Yeah, I have never to date, and I could have with some people, but I still refrained.
By and large, a lot of the difficulty comes from, well, difficulty in managing multiple accounts, as Neff was just describing here, and frankly, just plain people being dishonest about who they're blocking and not. So.
Well, she hasn't been responsive for the last 20 or so minutes, so I don't know if she's aware. But we'll see, I guess, if she comes or not. Ah, there we go, Fiona. Welcome.
Welcome, Fiona.
Hello.
Welcome.
Can I be the first to ask Nephilim the question?
Okay.
Because I've been waiting for now.
Okay, so
Yep.
Hi Fiona. I don't really we've met before. I'm Quantum Overlord. I host the Supernatural Sci-Fi show. Currently, we have a format where Nephilim talks for under 2 minutes, and then the person responds for under 2 minutes. So I am going to be quite strict on the timings. It's just to ensure that there aren't loads of people in the hangout at once shouting at each other. That's the only reason why I've done it. That's okay.
Is she muted? Cause oh.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's no problem for me at all.
Thank you very much.
And I will just say that you're asking me to bring evidence of what Nephilim had said. It was scattered through numerous comment threads on G+.
Can you if he comes back, maybe try to screen share it so you can see it or something like that?
I would be hunting back through almost a month's worth of G+ posts, but 4 other people did confirm they saw it as well.
Okay.
And they confirmed it. They actually confirmed it in a hangout with Nephi, and they said to Nephi, "I saw you do it." The 4 people said they saw him do it.
Too bad we can't bring him in the hangout.
Right, but I mean, I think that's just
right. So I think what we'll do is
done and dusted.
Let his question under 2 minutes, then let's have Fiona responding to that. I'm just going to get rid of this bloody screen share. Okay, so Neff, if you want to start, and then Fiona will respond to you. Okay.
Well, I don't know where to go. I mean, what am I to say? Life has been proven to be a product of special creation. God's word states so. The scientific evidence validates God's word on the matter. Excuse me. Life is based on information that defines organisms. It's complex specified information. It's overlapping, nested, forward read one direction provides one information, read the other direction provides another. It's algorithmic. It's coded. It's a code system. It has overlapping and nested information sequences, and it's just irrational to believe in the modern era that evolution could be true in light of what we've discovered. People that say evolution is true in light of the modern era are just unable to find a mechanism for evolution. They're clinging to evolution theory because there's some reason that they want evolution to be true. It's as a gross misrepresentation of truth as it's like somebody sitting on a couch in a room full with blue boxes all along the walls and saying, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. I've never seen this evidence for a blue box. What the hell are you talking about? That's how absurd it is to believe in evolution in the 21st century.
Do you want to respond, Fiona? Are you there?
Okay, well, first of all, we'll point out that evolution is defined as the change in allele frequencies within a population over time. We actually observe and study the change in allele frequencies within a population over time. Thus, we observe evolution. It is seen. It is studied happening. We can actually follow the genetic changes. So to say that a belief in an observed process is irrational is irrational in and of itself. If you can see that process happening, then it is irrational to say it doesn't happen. It's closing your eyes, sticking your fingers in your ears and shouting la la la. Now, you can argue with the definition of evolution if you wish. However, that is the definition that is used by scientists. The change in allele frequencies within a population over time.
Well, I would ask, if that's what you think evolution is, can you show me an example that's scientific or reason to believe that changes to allele frequency creates new genetic information that codes for new anatomical features? Because that's precisely what evolution theory contends, that it built the Darwinian tree of life. And without, wait, Fiona, I know you're anxious, without evidence for this, you have no evidence for evolution. So if evolution were true, it has produced all the anatomical features of all the types of life that live in this world. Now, if you want to believe that changes to allele frequency changes how frequently a particular variant of a gene is present in a population, that's not by itself a mechanism that codes for new information. That's changing how frequently existing information exists in a population. What you have to have for evolution to be true is information arising to code for new things that do not exist in their antecedent. Can you provide me a reason to believe changing how frequently existing information in a population exists is going to code for new things? And if you cite mutation to those changed to frequent the alleles that exist in the population, then I would ask you to provide evidence that random genetic mutation creates new genetic information that codes for new structural designs. Can you do that?
Well, I'll point out one thing. You have completely confused evolution with the theory of evolution. As I said, evolution is defined as the change in allele frequencies within a population over time. It is a process. Now, the mechanism by which that process is brought about is described in the theory of evolution. And that is natural selection acting upon genetic variation within the population. And the genetic variation can arise in a number of different ways, but the bottom line is it is mutation. There are a number of methods by which mutation can occur. So,
can you point me to it? I'm sorry, go ahead.
So if you confuse evolution with the theory of evolution, then yes, from the definition I gave, the change in allele frequencies within a population over time, you will not find the mechanism, because it isn't a definition of the mechanism, it's a definition of the process that happens within populations. The theory of evolution defines the mechanism by which the process of evolution occurs.
Okay, so back to my question. Can you give me evidence that changing the frequency in which a gene variant exists in a population by itself is capable of generating the new information necessary to code for new anatomical features? Or can you give me evidence that random genetic or any type of genetic change, any whatsoever, any mechanism, mutation, whatever you might want it to be, translational frame shift mutation, random genetic mutation, any kind of genetic mutation is capable of doing that, so that building the new information necessary for, say, the tail of a creature to produce a stinger, like in a scorpion? What scientific evidence have you found?
Could somebody paraphrase the question for me, because it went on for so long, I have no idea what he's asking me.
I'm asking you for the mechanism. I'm asking you, so you're talking about changes to allele frequency and random mutation. I'm asking you for scientific reason to believe that changes to allele frequency and genetic mutation generate the new information necessary to code for new anatomical features which do not exist in the antecedent.
Changes to allele frequency do not create new information, and I haven't claimed that. What can create new variants of a gene? A mutation. and they can then be selected for by natural selection. Now, you can get, for example, a gene duplication. When you get a gene duplication, you then have two functioning copies. One of those copies can undergo all sorts of mutations without any detrimental effect because they're still a functioning copy.
Okay, so back to my question. Fiona, can you give me scientific evidence that random mutation and changes to allele frequency will generate the information necessary to code for new anatomical features that do not exist in the antecedents, so that the Darwinian tree of life is scientifically believable? This will be the third time I've asked you this question.
But I've already pointed out to you that the change in allele frequency doesn't create any new information. Therefore, asking me for the mechanism by which it creates it is asking me a non-question.
I said changes to allele frequency and mutation.
Yes, but you keep including the changes to allele frequency. They are not going to give you anything new. That's where mutation comes in.
Okay, evolutionists believe that mutations act upon genetic sequences of information, transform them into new information that codes for new frequency, new features that exist in organisms. These become prominent in the population by changes to allele frequency. Eventually, you get a transitional form. Mm-hmm. This is right. That's what you believe, right? Okay, so what's the scientific evidence of it? That's all I'm asking. Okay. Where is the evidence that mutation builds new genetic information that codes for new anatomical features, so the Darwinian tree of life is believable scientifically, not a fantasy?
Well, number one, you keep homing in on a new anatomical feature. You ask that every single time. And even if you look from fish, through the amphibians, through the reptiles, etc., you will notice that the occurrence of a brand new anatomical feature is very, very rare. Look at the body plans. You see, you're asking for a feature that has never been seen before when you say a new anatomical feature. That's what you're asking for. How can I give you an example of something that's never been seen before?
Well, new roofing bones and snout bones would be new anatomical features, Fiona. And from Pandorixis to Ichthyostega, supposedly that changed a lot. I'm asking you for the scientific evidence that mutations is capable of doing that.
Right, you're asking me for an example of a mutation, a single mutation, which can result in that. Now, the problem with that is that evolution happens over a long period of time.
Yes, that's the answer you get. See, long ago and far away. You give it enough time, and what I can't give you evidence for happens anyway. This is why evolution theory is fantasy, Fiona. See, it's not science. I'm asking you for scientific reason. Not fantasizal, not imaginary.
May I ask you that when I am answering your questions, you mute your microphone so that I can't hear you laughing at me? It's exceedingly rude.
Well, here's Fiona. You know what I think is. Fiona, you know what I think is rude? I think it's rude for people who say they believe in Jesus Christ to say God didn't create anything and evolution is true, but I can't give you a mechanism for it. And then mock me for not and then mock me for believing. And then,
I gave you a mechanism.
You did? I asked for evidence that genetic
mutation. I gave you a mechanism.
No, you gave me a fantasy. You say that genetic mutation does it, but I'm asking you for the scientific reason to believe that. You can't give
the mechanism is natural selection acting upon genetic variation within the population. That's the mechanism.
Can you show me that it's scientific to believe
that
happens?
Okay, let's have a look. If we take a population of bacteria that are sensitive to an antibiotic, and that we introduce the antibiotic into that environment, and we study the population, we will find that the number of sensitive individuals within that population drops like a stone, and the number of individuals resistant to the antibiotic rises. That is a change in allele frequencies. That is a change in the frequency of the resistant form. Now, that resistance is encoded in the DNA. So you can have even horizontal gene transfer in bacteria to assist you on your way. But you have an alteration of the target of the antibiotic. So the antibiotic can no longer act. It can't attack its target anymore because the target has changed. And that's passed on in bacteria from generation to generation.
So Fiona, what you're talking about is
the frequencies.
You're talking about evidence of survivability. Nobody argues that creatures can't, genetically adapt. That's evidence of intelligent design. But what I'm asking you for is something you and every other evolutionist on this planet is completely unable to give. A scientific reason to believe that new genetic information arises that codes for new anatomical features. The ability to digest vitamin, the ability to utilize vitamin C, the ability to break down nylon. These things don't affect anatomy. Do you understand that?
Yeah, exactly, and that is why you always specifically ask for an example of anatomy, because you know that we have got plenty of examples. Now, as for the ability to utilize vitamin C, in actual fact, the mutation that has occurred in the primates is a loss of the ability to utilize vitamin C. The primates split into two groups, the strepsirrhini and haplorhini. Now the strepsirrhini have a functioning gene, it's the GUL-O gene. They have a functioning gene. They can, within their own bodies, manufacture vitamin C. However, the haplorhini have a broken version of the gene. Almost half the gene is missing. It lacks a promoter. It lacks exons 1 to 6 and exon 11, if I remember correctly. So there's about half of the gene missing. It is not expressed at all because of the lack of the promoter. No transcript has ever been detected from that. Although people have looked, but there is no transcript. Now, that's a whole group, the whole haplorhini group, have lost the ability to synthesize their own vitamin C. And when you look at that mutation is shared across all of the haplorhini.
But Fiona, what you're pointing to is you're pointing to something that's a negative. The organism has lost something. That's not going to support evolution. Secondly, it's not evidence that organisms change in their anatomy. That's what evolutionists believe. So you believe single-celled organisms became multicellular organisms, and every anatomical feature of every type of living thing on this planet was produced by chance association of molecules. That's what we call them mutations, whether programmed or not. Horizontal gene transfer, anything you want to, all these ideas that you have. And yet we have no scientific reason to believe that the anatomy of organisms changes so there's any mechanism for it. And I've been asking you for that. You're unable to do it. See, this is wait. I'm not quite finished. So this is what I meant when I said when you ask evolutionists for actual evidence of evolution, they go into a long series of little micro theories that supposedly supports an idea, and then another one that supports that one, another one supports that one, and never can give you the actual mechanism for evolution because there is none. You see, there is no mechanism in nature for the production of new genetic information that codes for new anatomical features. And the list of these is extensive. You've got the stinger in the tail of a wasp. It's different from the stinger in the tail of a bee. You've got the bombardier beetle's chemical gun. You've got a tongue. That's an anatomical feature. Okay, the existence of teeth is an anatomical feature. Eyeballs are anatomical features. Hair follicles are anatomical features. The list is extensive. All of these kinds of creatures, I can't list them all for you. You got the dung beetle, you got the giraffe, you name them, right? They all have different anatomies. I mean, there are types of organisms that produce after their kind, just like the Bible says, right? But there are different anatomies. Now, you, as an evolutionist, have to believe that there is some genetic mechanism that codes for new information so that a new anatomical feature can arise, just like you believe a fish gained bones, digits, cartilage, tendons, and got legs instead of fins. That's anatomical change. I'm asking you for the scientific reason to believe anatomy, new anatomical features can arise because of changes to genetics. But you can't provide one. So what you do instead is carry on about, vitamin C utilization. That doesn't have anything to do with anatomy. You'll carry on about nylonase. Doesn't have anything to do with anatomy. So you'll talk about one idea and say, oh, I see. Genetics can change. Duh. Why didn't I see it before? But I don't see your fantasy. See, there is no scientific evidence for a mechanism for evolution. What we have is genetic information that codes for the features of living things, and they produce those features in every generation thereafter. Okay, with the exception of phenotypic plasticity, which proves that the genetic information was already in the preceding population anyway. Yeah. It's not a mechanism for new information.
Yeah, we've gone quite a bit over 2 minutes, so I think you have a chance to respond to a few of those points.
Oh, well, I can't even remember how many points are in there. But what we'll point out is that if you're looking for a change in anatomy, you can look at what happens when there are mutations in Hox genes. But the problem there is that that doesn't fit in with what is being demanded, as in new anatomical features. So if you have changes in Hox genes which change, for example, if you end up with legs growing out the head of a Drosophila, that doesn't count because a leg is not a new anatomical feature according to Nephi. So when I can give an example of how a very small change in one gene can have gross anatomical consequences, that doesn't count as far as he's concerned because it's not a new anatomical feature. But the problem with it is this. Go from fish and come all the way up to the mammals, and you will notice that when you look at gross anatomy, there are very few changes anyway. You have a head stuck on top of a neck. You've got a mouth at one end, you've got a bum at the other. You have limbs of some sort. So what new anatomical feature is he looking for? He's looking for a feature that we've never seen. He wants me to give the genetic basis for a change that is not observed. If we look at our fish, and we look at sand gobies and mud skippers and amphibians. Sand goby is a fish. It behaves like a fish. It does everything a fish does. Mud skippers, on the other hand, have got extra strength in those front fins to drag themselves over mud. And they seem to be like a halfway house between a fish and an amphibian. The strengthening of the front fins. But you see, that's not a new anatomical feature because it's still a front fin. And even if it was further along and it was almost a front limb, a front leg of an amphibian, that's still not going to count as a new anatomical feature for Nephilim because legs exist. So what he's asking for is something that is an impossibility.
Okay, Fiona, you said this evolution from fish to amphibian tetrapods you argued would require is relatively few changes. That's not true at all. It's a tremendous number of changes. New organs that don't exist, scales disappear. You've got new cartilage, new bones, new tendons, new, in fact, the roofing bones and snout bones of these creatures supposedly change dramatically in number. I don't know where you get this idea. That's few changes. That's millions of changes. Okay. Now you cite Drosophila. You point to a fly. Indeed, an eyeball where there's supposed to be an eyeball, you get an antenna or a leg. That's not a new feature. That's in fact the placement of an existing feature coded by existing information in the wrong location of the body plan. These creatures are unable to survive outside the environment of the laboratory where they're cared for carefully. They've become unable to survive. So as evidence for your evolution, you pointed to something that's, one, is caused by man, second, in a laboratory, two, has made the creature unable to survive. Boy, that's really going to help evolution. And thirdly, it's not a new feature. It's the misplacement of an existing feature coded by existing information in the wrong place in the body plan. You can't get evolution by that mechanism. Instead, what you get is a creature that goes extinct instantly. Okay, that's not going to help you. And then you talk about mud skippers. They're a living fossil. That doesn't help you either. They haven't changed in many millions of years, supposedly. Like tens of thousands of creatures in the fossil record, no change. Not a bit. No change. Creatures are either extinct or they still exist. If they still exist, they're called living fossils. If they're extinct, well, they're just extinct. But so you have provided nothing. I've asked you for a genetic, you admitted that you can't see this imaginary change that takes place that codes for all these features or even a mechanism for it. I'm asking you not for an observable example. That would be, that's pushing it too much. Just a mechanism.
Okay. What I will say is that Nephilim, you began with a complete straw man. I did not argue that very few changes were required to go from fish to amphibian. I didn't say anything about how many changes were required. So for you to say that I had argued that point isn't quite true, is it? That's not the point I made. Now, it seems that you're also confusing common descent with evolution. As I told you before, evolution is the change in allele frequencies within a population over time. When you are talking about the changes that we see within the fossil record, you will find that these changes do occur over long periods of time, but you will also find examples where there has been very little anatomical change, of what Nephilim calls living fossils. But the point is this: if an organism is highly adapted to its environment and there is no competition, it doesn't need to change. There is nothing to drive that change. There is no natural selection, and thus the animals remain unchanged. Look at the shark. Then there's the coelacanth. Its anatomy, although they initially thought that the coelacanth was unchanged, it turns out that there have been changes in the coelacanth, but not huge changes, because it is successful in its environment.
I think your mic's muted.
Okay, so you're unable to provide a mechanism. You did say few changes. It would represent few changes, but it would be millions. If we rewind this hangout, we'll see that you did say that represents few changes. The coelacanth disappears from the fossil record 75 million years. It's a lobe-finned fish. It still exists. It's just a lobe-finned fish. There's not been anatomical change in coelacanth either. It's a living fossil too. So, but see, the evolutionist is the one who believes the long ago and far away. You know, if we just add the time, even though we can't provide a mechanism, even though we don't have an observable example, it happens anyway, long ago and far away, once upon a time. See, that's not scientific. You can't even provide a mechanism for it. I'm sorry, evolution is just false. It's been disproven. This is the 21st century. We have modern biology today. Darwin couldn't have guessed what was going to be discovered. He was wrong.
Hey, Neff, I got a question. What evidence shows that evolution's been disproven?
The existence of the DNA molecule, genetically, digitally encoded, multi-hierarchical, three-dimensional, forward-backward reading, algorithmic information processing material in the cell that decodes for the features of an organism. It's proof positive life was designed.
Fiona, you want to take this? I'm not sure if you want to go.
Is this? Are we now moving into abiogenesis, Nephi?
Apparently we are.
Yeah, apparently so.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
well,
we've left evolution.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That would mean if we're going to discuss that, then we're leaving evolution behind and we're moving into abiogenesis.
No, I didn't posit anything about abiogenesis, but abiogenesis is the last subject any evolutionist wants to discuss. But if you want to, we'll go there.
That's because abiogenesis and evolution are separate.
Well, they're two different things. Evolution deals with speciation, and abiogenesis begins with the origins of life itself.
Well,
and you're trying to equate those, and they're not the same at all.
Well, if that's true, why do the biologists, evolutionist ones, say that abiogenesis is the evolution of the cell from inanimate matter? If you don't believe that's true,
it's just word. It's just the word. It's just the word, man.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's just.
Can I just cut
Sorry.
Can I just cut it here? It's getting a little bit disorganized. Matt, your microphone is a little bit loud. Anyway, I think, did Fiona want to respond, and then we could continue with that discourse for a bit, and you'll get a chance to say something later if we come back.
Yeah. Evolutionary biologists don't actually say a lot about how life began. That would be those that work in abiogenesis, and they tend to be biochemists and chemists, because it's to do with what reactions are actually possible. What actual chemical reactions can occur in nature. And that is where abiogenesis hypotheses are targeted and what they're being tested. It's got nothing to do with evolution. Evolution can only occur once there is something that is replicating. Until you have something replicating, you cannot have change over time within that replicating molecule.
So evolution, abiogenesis is not the evolution of the first cell from inanimate matter, and any more than the formation of stars and galaxies is the evolution of the cosmos, huh?
So now what we're doing is we are moving from biological evolution and the scientific definition of it to the colloquial use of the word evolution.
Okay, well, you're welcome to deny that abiogenesis is evolution all you want to, but I would just say it's also an impossibility, and that's why scientists are arguing for panspermia and all this other junk, looking for some other explanation for the living things that exist.
Have you actually read into abiogenesis at all?
No,
I wouldn't be discussing it if I had.
Okay,
then if you have read into it, you'd know that they're two different things, and abiogenesis doesn't really discuss anything about evolution. It kind of just discusses, the way life has began in the primordial Earth.
Well, then why do biologists call abiogenesis the evolution of the cell from inanimate matter?
Because it's just the use of the word. It's not the use of the theory.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference, man. There's a difference.
Really? Okay.
There is, if you knew what you were reading and not just pulling stuff out of your
Well,
your ass, man.
The current generation of evolutionists make this fallacious argument that abiogenesis, because it's given a separate theory, is not evolution in some way, because they can't answer for it. And it's their way of trying to push it out of the arena, and so they don't have to try to give an account for it. That's quite obvious. But, you can't provide evidence for that either. And you need abiogenesis to have evolution. There's just no mechanism for it. The game is over for evolution, folks. I'm sorry. It's an excuse, a naturalistic excuse.
And yet it is still a viable, and yet it is now, evolution is now a well-substantiated fact now.
Really?
It's so destroyed, man. It is so destroyed.
If that's true, then why can't you provide a mechanism for it? See, Fiona can't do it, you can't do it.
I have provided a mechanism. The mechanism, the theory of evolution, is natural selection acting upon genetic variation within a population.
And I
That's the mechanism for evolution.
And I asked you what evidence there is that genetic variation builds new information that codes for new anatomical features. You can't cite it.
And
so you're just asking multiple questions in this, man. You just don't want to listen.
No, that's
you really don't want to listen.
That's what she would have to have as evidence for her claim that change to genetic information causes evolution.
May I just point one thing out here? May I just point one thing out here? Before we get dragged off abiogenesis, Nephilim made a couple of claims there. I would suggest to him that he goes and reads a paper by Lincoln and Joyce from 2009, and that is about the self-replication of synthetic RNA molecules. And I've given him that paper before. The two RNA molecules in a protein-free system, so there are no enzymes at all, just the two RNA molecules, and they self-catalyze their own replication. Because remember, these RNA molecules are also known as ribozymes, as in they are ribonucleic acids, but they have catalytic activity, and they can catalyze reactions the way a proteinaceous enzyme can. So Lincoln and Joyce showed that two RNA molecules can catalyze their own replication. There's also a paper out towards the end of last year that when a pyrimidine nucleotide was mixed with ribose, so that's just a pyrimidine base, is mixed with ribose, a ribonucleoside is able to be formed. Again, protein-free system, no enzyme. It's just a chemical reaction. So that gives you a ribose sugar with a nitrogenous base on it. And when you put them together, under the correct conditions, those nucleosides self-polymerize. In other words, they form a long chain with a sugar phosphate backbone, which is an RNA molecule. Again, protein-free system. This is just chemical reactions.
Okay. All right. Well, firstly, you've made a couple of mistakes here. First off, you speak of RNA self-replication. That doesn't take place more than up to about 10 amino acids. So, secondly...
Whoa! Excuse me, there are no amino acids in RNA. That's the first thing I need to say before you go any further, because there are no amino acids in RNA. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. RNA is not a protein. There are no amino acids in RNA. So to say that RNA can't get further than 10 amino acids is a complete mistake, because there are no amino acids in RNA.
Okay. So, but it can't produce anything that goes beyond about 10 amino acids. Okay. Now,
Neff, aren't you listening?
Wait, please. RNA by itself is a product of DNA, so let's get rid of this person that's just being rude, shall we?
I'm sorry, I'm coughing.
Oh, was it you? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just coughing. I'm sorry I coughed.
Okay. Oh, I thought it was somebody being rude. I was looking at something. Okay, my mistake. Okay, so RNA is a product of DNA, so you got to have that first.
No.
And first off, it's interdependent, and secondly, you mentioned ribose. But the problem with ribose, Fiona, is see here you believe a biogenesis is possible, but in the absence of enzymes, there is no chemical reaction that produces the sugar ribose. Okay? In the absence of enzymes, there is no chemical reaction that produces the sugar ribose. That's the backbone of the RNA and DNA molecule. So you're talking about things that are after the fact, but we can take in the laboratory and get RNA to synthesize itself up to a certain level, and that's all. But you can't even get the RNA without the DNA and the ribosomes, and the transfer molecules. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get the DNA molecule that codes for the RNA in the first place by mere chemistry, because I'll say again, in the absence of enzymes, there is no chemical reaction that produces the sugar ribose. You got to have a cell for that, Fiona. Did you just make a scientifically false statement when you said ribose? Sounds like you did.
Excuse me, is that an attack saying that I am lying?
Did you not just say that you can get
Nephilim, you need to answer that.
You said it was in an enzyme-free environment, is what you said. Then you mentioned ribose. Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned ribose.
In a test tube in a laboratory, in a test tube in a laboratory, they took some ribose and they mixed it with a pyrimidine nucleotide. I did not claim that they synthesized the ribose.
Okay.
You've not listened to anything I said.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
This is the problem. Yeah, but that's the problem, Nephilim, because you actually made an accusation of dishonesty on my part because you hadn't listened to what I said.
I asked you if you did make a scientifically false statement, and I asked you to clarify that. And that's what you did.
It. Then that is the problem, because you have to throw that in there. You couldn't even just say, "Have you made a mistake?" You have to throw that in there.
That's exactly what I did.
Scientifically false statement. And no, I hadn't made a scientifically false statement. The point is this: I explained to you that when Lincoln and Joyce did this experiment, they didn't have any DNA, and yet they have self-replicating RNA molecules. When the ribose and the nitrogenous bases were put together, they didn't have any DNA, and they didn't have any enzymes. But a chemical reaction occurred which attached the nitrogenous base to the sugar molecule.
Okay,
no enzymes, no DNA.
But Fiona, you're talking about things after the fact. You've already got RNA. Where does RNA come from? Doesn't it? It's coded in the DNA, right?
Not always.
It's a product of DNA, right? So you don't even get that.
Nope.
You're starting with something that's already a product of design, something that is already interdependent with the cell and the genetic material to exist. You're not talking about seeing RNA form naturally by chemical guys put stuff in a lab and without human intervention, observe it, came back next week, and there's an RNA molecule. Secondly, RNA is information. You don't get that by mere chemical chemistry either. Okay, and again, the sugar ribose requires enzymes to exist. Okay, so what you're talking about is like taking an automobile and saying, look, I'm going to show you how the automobile can be changed by mechanics. But wait a minute, where'd the automobile come from? Somebody designed it and manufactured it. You're talking about things after the fact. That doesn't support abiogenesis, Fiona. Sorry.
Automobiles don't breed.
Doesn't matter. It requires the cell, it requires the DNA, it requires the ribosome.
An automobile doesn't require a cell. No, an automobile doesn't require a cell. An automobile does not require a cell.
Automobiles aren't living organisms either, so
Does RNA require
one at once? Otherwise, I'm going to have to be a little bit stricter with this. So it would help me if people just talk one at once. Thanks.
Does RNA require DNA, Fiona?
No. No, you can actually look at RNA viruses. They use RNA as their genetic material, not DNA.
Okay, that's a creature
RNA.
that is already. That's a creature that's already designed. Can you get abiogenesis of cellular organisms? Can you get abiogenesis of cellular organisms? Can you get the RNA in cellular organisms, like any cell, even a bacteria or a multicellular organisms that have RNA in them? Can you get the RNA without the DNA?
Once you go above the viruses and you go into the prokaryotes, the genetic material is always DNA. However, that doesn't mean that RNA cannot be, in and of itself, the genetic material, because viruses can use RNA as their genetic material. There is nothing to stop it. The fact is that the way life has developed, RNA has been the preferred molecule because, so DNA has been the preferred molecule because RNA actually undergoes mutation at a much greater rate. It's less stable.
Are you trying to say that the animal kingdom came into a rise because chemistry can produce an RNA molecule in the absence of DNA?
I'm saying there's one hypothesis that is being looked at.
But you can't provide evidence that RNA can come about by sheer chemical interactions without a cell and DNA.
Well, as I say, they've got to the stage where you can mix a sugar with a nitrogenous base and end up with a ribonucleoside, and that they will self-polymerize into an RNA molecule.
So the answer is no. Outside the cell, it's not going to happen without human designing of the product?
We don't know the answer to that.
Well, wait a minute. Isn't it true that RNA depends on the existence of DNA?
No.
No,
because then you wouldn't have RNA viruses.
Okay, so
Ebola virus. Ebola is an RNA virus. Its genome is RNA. It's negative sense RNA.
Okay, so you're saying that viruses and prokaryotes are related, right? And somehow RNA in the animal kingdom developed by naturalistic processes, or you're saying it's a passover from viruses some way? Is that what you're trying to allude?
No,
because I asked you for a natural chemical processes that can produce RNA. Pointing to the virus is not an explanation. You're pointing to the finished product.
I gave you the example of the experiment where the sugar and the nitrogenous base underwent a chemical reaction whereby the nitrogenous base bound onto the sugar molecule.
Ribose, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then I just already point out that in the absence of enzymes, there's no chemical reaction that produces ribose.
But that's the point. I'm not talking about where the ribose came from yet, am I?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. You're the abiogenesis, not me.
But
I'm
that's
asking you
the
for
point.
scientific reason to believe it.
What I'm trying to point out to you is that they have found this reaction can occur where a nitrogenous base will bind onto the ribose sugar.
You're already starting with ribose. It was put into the vial.
Yes.
Okay.
And so was a nitrogenous base. Everything was put in the vial.
Okay.
The point is this. We found out that that part of it is not chemically impossible.
Wait. Is it not true that in the absence of enzymes, there's no chemical reaction that will produce ribose? True?
Now, to be honest, that I don't know because I am not a chemist.
Okay.
This is why I'm saying it's chemists that are tending to work on this.
Okay. Okay, Robert Shapiro states so in his critical analysis, Origins of Life, Evolution in the Biosphere, 1995 and 1999. That's Robert Shapiro. He states, in the absence of enzymes, there is no chemical reaction that produces the sugar ribose, which is the backbone of RNA and DNA. Now, you being the evolutionist, the biogenesis, you believe RNA came about by chance associations of molecules and nature can do it. Outside of the living cell, outside of what's already built, well, outside of the chemical interdependency between DNA and RNA. I'm not the one who believes that junk. So if you say
you've gone on about the...
You need to be able to provide a reason to believe RNA came into existence without a cell, Fiona.
You've done it again. I've shown that you don't have to have this interdependency between RNA and DNA, but you've repeated it again.
Okay, so you don't get RNA without ribose, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, there is no chemical reaction outside of the existence of enzymes, which are themselves a product of the cell, that produces ribose. So you're the one that produces abiogenesis. You're starting with the product of design.
What I'm saying is that I am not a chemist. Now, there are various hypotheses about how RNA could have come about. And I will just read you this here. This is from Bennett, Kim, and Carrigan in 2012. And they state our hypothesis centres on a geological model that synthesizes RNA in a prebiotic intermountain dry valley, not in a marine environment. And they're talking about having borate stabilized carbohydrates, formamide and ammonium formate, and as atmospheric CO2. Okay, I'll just stop there because obviously you don't really want to know about it.
Well, Fiona, you started with ribose, and
that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
And you're the one who believes that there is a chemical process outside of the presence of enzymes that can produce it. Because that's what you see. To get the enzyme, you need the cell, and you've already acknowledged you need DNA to make RNA.
And what I was reading out was an answer to that.
Ribose is the backbone of RNA.
What I was reading out was an answer to that question.
Okay, has it been observed to take place in a laboratory? The answer is no. Right.
Listen, this is the problem. There are so many things unknown about how life began. Okay?
Right.
We don't have all the answers, but I honestly believe that God is powerful enough to have managed to design the laws of physics so that that process could take place. You seem to think that God could not design those processes.
I say God did not. God stated in His Word He did not. He stated He created it. He stated it. He created it, and God's not a liar. And the evidence is He did that very thing. See, I've just pointed out to you a serious problem with your abiogenesis theory. You got the RNA doesn't come into being without the DNA, and then both of them.
No. That again.
Wait. Both of them require ribose. Ribose.
I have to ask you.
Ribose
that he is repeating something that I've already pointed out isn't actually true. He keeps going on about RNA being utterly dependent on DNA. I've already provided references where that is not the case. For him to keep repeating that.
What, the virus, right?
No, she's giving you evidence that it has under the laboratory environment, and she's giving you and the virus is one of them, and you just don't want to listen.
No. See, she's pointing to what they've done in the laboratory is take ribose, which already existed, from an organism, and put it into a vial. You're starting with the finished product. That's not going to help you. You've got to explain the existence of the ribose to explain the RNA molecule. You can't do it.
What I am pointing out is that you keep saying DNA is required when it's not.
Interject here because this is not going to end, and it does have to end at some point. So
yeah, it does have to hang out at 10 o'clock about science.
But we might have time to come back to this. Some people want to make a few points. I mean, Nadia, very briefly make your point, but be really brief. so that we have time to get everything in, because I know you have to go soon, but you wanted to make a point, so make it very briefly, please.
Yes, Neff, I would, ask yourself why you feel this denial of evolution is so important to you, and particularly when it is very compatible with theistic beliefs. I mean, actually, your debate with Fiona here is she is a theistic evolutionist. So I feel that there's a lot of questions to ask about how and why you feel it's so essential, and maybe if it truly is that essential. All right.
Well, it's very important. Firstly, if you're a Christian, from the Christian point of view, you're in denial of God's word if you say that God created life through any kind of imaginary naturalistic process, because he stated quite clearly, excuse me, even Jesus Christ himself stated quite clearly it was specially made in the beginning in a literal 6-day week. So a Christian who argues for abiogenesis or evolution theory is outside of God's truth.
Oh,
they're calling God what? Because his word, he has stated the opposite. Secondly, the scientific evidence supports God's word on the matter. Evolution theory is an idea that of naturalism that people cling to in order to try to make an excuse for their existence without the presence of God.
Right, okay, so a few other people have got some points here. So, Dylan, you've been waiting for ages. Do you have a point to make very briefly?
Yeah, can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, you were a bit quiet.
Okay, I'll try to speak up a bit. Good morning from Australia. I'll try to keep it short. Neff, I've been listening, and you provided a lot of points trying to disprove the accepted scientific model whereby evolution and speciation occurs naturally. And when asked for a positive point for intelligent design, you've stated that creation of code has only ever been observed when an intelligent agent has created it, referring to, for example, writing of software code. So my question, Neff, is when have we ever observed the creation of biological code by a non-biological supernatural entity, aka intelligent design?
Well, we haven't, and we haven't observed nature do any such thing either. So we're looking at the past, and we're making an inference based on the evidence, and the evidence is for creation.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I thought, and I agree. Yes. Given that, why should we accept your model over the naturalistic model?
Because the naturalistic model has zero evidence. All the scientific learning, the discoveries that have been made, have demonstrated the idea is fallacious. We've discovered that life is based on. I'm explaining. Well, I've already explained in the beginning of this hangout. I stated that life is based on information and algorithmic linguistics properties. Those come only from mind. This is clear, emphatic, empirical evidence that everything that lives on this earth is a product of someone's mind. In fact, here's how it works for special creation. It's also evidence of special creation, because if you have algorithms, linguistics, and information that you want to put into a medium, so God designed these properties, the information, the algorithms, and linguistics. Now he needed a medium to do it. So God assembled the DNA molecule so that it would encode that information, those properties in it. That's special creation. That's manufacturing. So we have empirical evidence from biology that life was in fact not just intelligently designed, but also specially created. It was actually manufactured by God, not just designed in his mind, but he actually created it, made it come into being.
Okay, so George, you've been waiting for a while. I think you had a point, didn't you? Do you want to come now?
Yeah, I had a question about 2 hours ago which hasn't been addressed. It was in the form of a question, so I'll try to make it short in a statement. There's a video circling on the... I hear an echo. There was a video circling on the internet of a medical house doctor who did research on dinosaurs denying evolution, and he had problems with transitional species. And his method of research was going to hundreds of museums with his wife, and his wife taking the photos, and that was his evidence. And he presented that going all over America within the religious groups. I had my own encounter with you, Nephilimfree, about 1 or 2 years ago, and I haven't had a chance to look up the video before the show, but it was about beaked whales. Perhaps you remember that. It was on my channel, Jungle Hyena. And basically what you tend to do is what Matt said about an hour ago. You just read the title and you go with your own interpretation. And what you do is not read all the facts, which are in an article, and sometimes you misinterpret the text of the words and you present that as evidence. It is, of course, very difficult for a person like me who is not fully knowledgeable about DNA and such things to question that. And you are you have a lot of knowledge about these subjects, but I question the validity of your research, because my impression is that you willingly interpret sometimes things wrong, and that's basically what I wanted to say.
Okay. Well, let me respond to that. You mentioned whale and evolution. I'll give you two things to think about when it comes to whale evolution. What we have in the fossil record is creatures which have anterior fins or legs, and we have whales which have neither. Okay, so whales have two bones in their anatomy called ischium, and these bones are anchors for the penis because they're anchored with cartilage and tendon to the spine of the whale. The reason for that is because whales have penises up to 12 feet long, and they weigh tons, and reproduction can be a very violent creature when you're trying to, you can get the drift. So God gave them these two bones as anchors for the penis. Okay, but the evolutionist claims that they're vestigial of a pelvis. But here's the problem: we just have these two bones are part of the reproductive system. There is no reason to believe that any living creature ever had its penis based, the corpus cavernosa of its penis mounted directly to its pelvis in the past. We don't know of any such creature. Okay, so, but the evolutionist has to believe that there was a creature that walked on the earth, and every time it did, it was tearing and pulling at itself internally at the base of its penis when it walked, because its cavernosa were attached directly to its pelvis. That's illogical. Okay, so secondly, we have a transitional form between whales and Basilosaurus, Ambulocetus, whatnot, Rhodocetus, which have all those bones. What we should see as a transitional form is creatures losing bones, losing bones, losing bones, losing bones, etc., and then none. See, there are no transitional forms in the fossil record. You have creatures with all those bones. You have creatures like which are whales that have none of them. See, there is no transitional form there. And the last thing I would ask you to think about when it comes to whales is evolutionists believe that the snout, the nostrils of the predecessor to whales migrated. They merged into a single blowhole and migrated up the skull of the creature to the top to become a blowhole. If you don't believe that, you have to believe in the hopeful monster theory, which says that the blowhole appeared all of a sudden like that without transition. That wouldn't be tenable. Okay, so you have to believe it migrated. Now, do you believe that the air passages that go to the nose of these creatures migrated in such a way that these air passages passed right through the brain of the creature? Because that makes no sense, you see.
It doesn't matter what I think of it. You avoid the main question, and that is that you willingly misinterpret scientific research constantly. That was my main question.
Okay, hang on. We've got to continue now. Now, very briefly, Nephilim, I've got a question from a user, and then we'll go straight back to Fiona. So, Marcia1 asks, could you please ask Nephi's views on older hominids such as Heidelbergenesis and Ono2? What time frame does he give them, and how does he think they relate to us? So if you answer that question, and then I want Fiona to finish off.
My turn? You asking me to go ahead and speak, or the other fellow?
A user has asked a question. Could you please give your views on older hominids, and what time frame do you give them, and how do they relate to us?
Oh, okay.
This one.
Okay. Well, I would say that hominids are extinct apes. What are called hominids are extinct apes. Or in some cases, fully human bones have been classified as a hominid, a precursor, and they've been thrown out by the scientific community themselves who have acknowledged, wait a minute, this is fully human. We can't say this is any kind of precursor. Okay, so that has happened too. But the evidence, the problem with the belief that humans are related to these is one of the most powerful evidences I can give is, firstly, if you examine the features of these creatures, they're very much chimp-like. And secondly, the evolutionist has to believe that between a common ancestor between humans and chimpanzees, if you go back in time, we're related to a hominid somewhere, right? Both of us are related. We came from the common ancestor. Now, the problem with this is that human beings have 10% less DNA than a chimpanzee. They've got 10% more DNA material in their cells than you do. Now, to believe that that arose somehow over the history of the evolution of human beings and chimps from a common ancestor, you have to believe that countless random genetic mutations added genetic material to the DNA. But the problem is, we don't have any reason to believe that any large portion of the DNA molecule, such as 10% of it, is junk. It's all specified information. The junk DNA paradigm of the evolutionist has been thrown out. Even evolutionists today are acknowledging this, evolutionist scientists. So I would say that had that many random genetic mutations accrued in the genome of a chimpanzee to produce 10% more DNA, would have constituted such detrimental effects to the DNA that chimpanzees would have gone extinct long ago. And to support that, I'll give you there's a science paper says changes to I forgot the name of it. Why are we not extinct 100 times over? This is a science journal paper, and the question the geneticists are asking is, if random mutation has been accruing in the genome of human beings for hundreds of thousands of years, how come, because of the observed effects of them, why haven't we gone extinct 100 times over already? So, if that being true, then you see the problem with 10% more DNA arising in a chimpanzee than a human being. That should have made the chimpanzee go extinct 1,000 times or more over, but yet they didn't. So the inference is God designed these genomes differently, see, and we're not related to the chimpanzee at all.
No, I want to.
I'll just say that takes us right back to what I was saying about the haplorhini and their inability to synthesize vitamin C with a deletion of a large part of the gene, and the fact that this subgroup of primates all have exactly the same mutation.
That's not evidence we're related to them, though.
No, you do not consider it to be evidence that we are related to them.
How can their inability to
I need to go, people. I need to go, really, I've got 2 minutes left. But what I will say is this, Nephi may not consider that to be evidence of a relationship, but those who study the subject do consider it, because the chances of over 100 species all ending up with the exact same mutation in the exact same gene, independently of each other, is well nigh impossible. Right, now I really need to go because I've got something starting in 2 minutes' time.
Thank you for coming, Fiona. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Take care.
Take care of yourself.
Ta-ta.
Well, to that I would respond, human beings and chimpanzees might share genes, but so does a California purple sea urchin and the human being. 7,000 in fact, and we're not anatomically like them at all. Only like, what are called endogenous retroviruses. Over 90% of them found in chimpanzees and human beings are not in the same location in the genome. So here we see that Fiona is merely making an assumption of relatedness because both of us have a particular mutation. That's not evidence of relatedness. That's just both of us have experienced a similar mutation. Lots of creatures experience mutations all throughout their genomes. Endogenous retroviruses, over 94, I think it is, % of the ERVs that are in the human genome and the chimpanzee genome are not in the same location. Had evolution been true, they should almost all, the vast majority of them, if we're such closely related historically, they should be, the majority of them, in the same location, but they're not. So genetic similarity is not evidence of evolution. Well, it's 4 o'clock, and I've got some things I've got to do as well, so I need to get going before my day off from work is wasted completely. I'm not saying it's been a waste. I've enjoyed being here. Thank you for inviting me. But I do have some things I have to do while I still have some daylight, so I need to get going myself.
Thanks for coming on, Nick. I'm glad that you made responded to all those people asking you questions. I hope this has been a reasonable experience. The YouTube video will be up so people can do with it what they like. Feel free to come to any additional shows that we do.
Great.
After you leave, we might just have a few people just commenting on the discussion if you're okay with that. I mean, it's not as what people say, so we're not going to be talking behind your back or anything. But thank you very much for coming on, and Fiona.
I appreciate you inviting me. Thanks, and God bless you guys. Take care.
Bye, Nephilimfree. It's been a really good experience with you.
I enjoyed talking. Let's do it again.
Shalom. All right. Bye, Nephilim.
Quantum.
Okay, so if Nephilimfree's going now, then what we'll do is each person left to right will go with closing statements, and then we'll finish. Dylan, do you want to? Well, actually, Matt, you go first because you've been wanting to say something.
Oh, me first or Dylan?
Matt, you go first. Yeah.
Well, just wanted to say that this has actually been really fun. Nephilim kind of makes a little bit of a what am I looking for here? He makes very bold statements, but it's understandable. It's understandable from his point of view that he's so trapped in his little box of his in religion that he can't really see the truth in reality. Unfortunately, that's all I got to say, really.
Okay, so we'll go with Dylan next. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, you are right, Matt. A lot of bold statements, and most of the time, especially when it came to my question, where I was trying to get down to, why should we believe the supernatural model rather than the natural model? Neff did state that they both have equal amounts of evidence, which isn't correct, but that was more or less my understanding of his point, is that neither of them have been observed. So a simple application of Occam's razor would say that we should go with the naturalistic model rather than having to assume that supernatural forces are actually possible. So I wasn't convinced myself on any of the positive points that Neff tried to provide for intelligent design.
I wanted to say something, actually, since I've been quiet for almost 2 hours.
Well, that's rare.
I know, right? Well, hey, I said many times, if I am not an expert on a subject, I tend to shut up and listen, which is why, actually, I invited Fiona in here, because she is an expert. She has a degree. It was her work, and it's what she does. So, yeah, but here's the thing. I recognize that Nephilim has he's got his
box.
Point of view.
He's got his little blocks in there.
Yeah, he's got. I'm trying to be polite, but yeah, he's got his point of view. But let's face it. For when he replied to me at the very beginning that scientists themselves are disproving evolution, and that peer-reviewed papers, are disproving evolution, that's simply not true. We all know that's not true. The entire scientific consensus states that evolution not only is true, but is being proved more and more true and more relevant every single day. We all understand this from the scientific body. I mean, this has been stated over and over again by many scientific bodies and organizations themselves. So I think for him to, maintain his little box there, I said it, he has to believe everything is a conspiracy. Now, he said he didn't believe it's a conspiracy, but I don't see how else he can think what he actually thinks is true. And it not only would fall into line with what he believes about evolution, but also what he believes about geocentrism and the age of the universe. And basically, 99% of the scientists out there would have to be lying. We're talking about millions and millions of people would have to be deceiving everybody on purpose for some sort of sordid atheistic agenda, which he appears to believe is their motive. I don't think that this is representational of the entire scientific body, or even a small part of it, and I think that that in itself speaks volumes about his beliefs and how he derives them.
Okay, so I've got George and Dr. Quantum left. Can you keep it brief, because I do have to get off quite soon.
I'll go. Yeah, I 100% agree with Nathaniel. It's very difficult to debate him, for me especially, because I'm not very knowledgeable about DNA and the finer workings of that. I'm more knowledgeable on historical facts. But I'd like to say this was an enjoyable hangout to view, because we didn't allow, or perhaps he himself didn't allow, to go on a rant and block off other people, not allowing them to speak. And this didn't happen this time, so it was enjoyable to watch. Thank you.
Yeah, one quick addition. For people who are going to hate Quantum for cutting everyone short, please don't, because Fiona had to go anyway. There you go, Quantum, I said it.
Oh, thanks. Do you have a final point, Dr. Quantum?
I don't even know where to begin. Well, all I can say is I try to. I'm usually very polite, but I actually began being a little pissed off. I must say. The fact that Nif doesn't know that a bacteria is not a species in itself, I kept trying to explain it to him. And the funniest thing I noticed is that ever since his days where he discussed with Aaron and other people about evolution, when they told him that speciation is the definition of speciation is when two organisms can no longer interbreed. That is pretty much established. But then you wrote in the comment that speciation is not evolutionary change, so he keeps changing the flag or the goalposts all the time.
Okay. Anyway, so let's close up now. Thank you very everyone for joining. If you want to get an invite every 2 weeks, then add my Google Plus page, and I'll send an invite every 2 weeks. The one that we're doing in 2 weeks' time probably will not be as formal as this. This one was kept very formal, just to stop 10 people all shouting over each other. I hope that's achieved at least some of that.
Quantum, it wouldn't have been 10 people shouting over each other. It would have been 9 people shouting over Neff.
Wow.
Yep. Oh man, he would have left in under 5 minutes, crying like a little baby. I swear.
Well, anyway, I mean, just to point out that I'm not usually this strict moderating. I mean, Nathaniel will tell you that I usually
I agree.
Yeah.
I usually let go for a lot longer, but we did the 2-minute rule today to stop one individual dominating the conversation. And I know that none of you got to speak for very long because Neff got the majority of the time. But the whole point was that Neff would respond to each individual, then we'd get a response going. So I mean, I tried to do it as best as I could. Anyway, join again in 2 weeks for a somewhat less formal Supernatural Side Challenge show. And thanks everyone for coming. Thank you very much.
See you.
Thanks, Quantum.
Where's the stop podcast?
Thank you, Quantum.